Jerry, AI and security. That is a topic we can cover in 3.5 minutes, right?
I think we could talk about security for AI. How's that? There's a topic for three
Security for
minutes.
AI, security for AI systems. Okay, in particular, agentic AI systems. So let's dive into that. And this is, one of many debates. And I think we're going to disagree on this one. And I think that's going to be fun. So what are we disagreeing about, Jerry? And I'm not just being
Let-
contrary here.
So, Jason, I was recently involved in a panel, and part of that panel was, hey, agents are a new identity type. I disagree. I fundamentally disagree with that because what I'm dealing with is it's an agent that is doing things that needs permissions. I don't think we need another identity type across the enterprises. We already have users. We already have machine identities. We already have service accounts. One more identity that's really doing authentication. That's really needs access controls. Why do we need another identity in the space? That's my fundamental question and fundamental statement. I do not believe we need a new identity in at the enterprise level.
If historically people thought there were three states of matter: solid, liquid, and gas. And then they discovered that, oh my goodness, in this certain type of situations, there's this fourth state of matter called plasma, and we need to have a fourth state of matter. So I'm temporarily arguing that agentic AI is a different type of identity. It's not human, clearly. It's not fully or solely a machine identity. And it's got characteristics of both that I think we as an industry would benefit by treating as a separate type of identity. And it has certain elements in common of both of those things. And I think that it's distinct enough that it's worth treating them differently, because not just from a how many angels will dance on the head of a pin philosophical debate, from a true operational perspective. So we think about this, we have human users, and we know that they are unpredictable, and they're slow, and they make mistakes. And we have processes and technical controls to account for all of those things. And then we have machine identities, which are not human. They're not slow, they're fast. They don't make mistakes in the same way that humans make mistakes. They certainly do make mistakes, and they certainly have errors, but they are also much more predictable. In fact, you could argue they are highly predictable. And then you have these new agentic AIs that are in the middle there, that are unpredictable in some ways like humans, but they operate much, much more quickly, much faster. They're machine speed, and they make mistakes as well. And I think that those attributes of being non-deterministic and unpredictable, as well as operating at machine speed, are distinct enough that it's worth us treating them differently in some respects.
So I'm gonna be a little bit pedantic in because I caught one word you said, and I believe this. They behave differently, which is
Mhm.
100% accurate. And behavior is nothing more than an attribute or a context associated with an identity as it's doing something. So I look at it from, if we're building things like policy-based access control, which is what we talk about in
Right.
zero trust, that part of that is I have an identity, I have a subject associated with that identity, so I have some context around that identity, and then I have conditions by which they can operate. And those conditions can be dynamic. Really does depend on how you build your policy. So if I am building policy around agentic AI, and the fundamental belief is they're an identity, and I'm building policy based on condition associated with that identity. Those conditions can be dynamic based on what needs to happen. That I'm not treating it as any other identity, because the fundamental truth is, if I have a user, a human identity, they're going to fit within that policy. I could also have a machine identity that fits within that policy. So to me, whether they come together or they're distinctly different, it's still an identity that I'm really building policy around behavior. That's me being a little bit pedantic about what you just said. That's my argument.
That's your argument. Okay. Well, I'm certainly, we do have and want to have contextual access policies for those agents. I think that, clearly, if we think about all the stuff that we have to do with identities, whether they're machine or human identities, all of the things, of course, apply to agents. But I think it's a unique enough mixture of things where, obviously, from an authentication perspective, they're much closer to classic machine identities versus humans. But there are some complications there where they're acting on behalf of users, and we have not figured that out as an industry. Certainly, from a identity governance administration, an IGA, or an identity lifecycle perspective, they are much more like machine accounts, because you've got some sort of human who is ultimately responsible for them, who has to review, and there's got to be some sort of provisioning mechanism associated with that. And then from a monitoring perspective, I think they are going to be a little bit closer to humans, looking at unexpected, perhaps potentially anomalous behavior that needs to be evaluated in the context of security operations. And I do think that there are some best practices there, certainly, of having a larger number of very focused agents that are allowed to do and designed to do very specific tasks, as opposed to a smaller number of agents that can do 20 different things. It's much, much harder from a security, from an operations perspective, et cetera, to handle the latter case.
Well, one thing I will agree with, and I've heard, a lot of conversations and arguments around this, is specifically we can't do traditional identity access management for agents. 100% agree with that statement. What I will also add to that is I've been a proponent of changing how we do identity access management for the last 5 to 7 years anyway, which performs closer to what we need to do around agentic AI. And I'm just going to leave it there, I think, on the table with that. And we can agree to disagree, and we can have further debates about this.
I think so, and I think that really, we need to, when you as an enterprise are looking at this, clearly there are some things that are going to be different about this, and whether it fully aligns with machine or human, more similarly or more distinctly, is really going to depend on the specifics of the agent or even the types of agents. And maybe that there's a further discussion that we have around across this taxonomy of agents. Some are going to look more like this, and some are going to look more like that, and they might fall into the different camps. I think there's a Venn diagram there that we're going to have to visualize at some point. But I think we'll agree to disagree and close this one out.
That's right.